Hemp farmers are often hosed over by unscrupulous seed dealers in very basic ways. The most common behavior is a simple lie when a farmer asks, is your seed compliant with the 0.3% total THC rule? And the seed provider says, yes, they are. Very simple lie. So we know for a fact that most of the variants that exist that have been sequenced that are in GenBank and studied by cannabis researchers at this point, uh, the CBDA alleles, the gene responsible for producing CBD in the plant, produces both CBDA, THCA, and CBCA, all three of those compounds from the precursor CBGA. The ratio, or the amount of CBD to THC that's present in these plants, is anywhere between 23 to 1 up to around 30 to 1, depending on which particular CBDA synthase variant is present in your plant and other environmental conditions. The catalytic efficiency of these conversions changes depending on the pH that is present in the plant itself. Not necessarily external pH mediated, but things that are happening within the chemistry of the plant. So an important realization then is that you have defined ratios that you're working with this particular crop. And the more sophisticated misleading that is happening at this point in the market is from breeders who are claiming that their varieties only attain 8% CBD or 8% total cannabinoid content and consistently achieve less than zero point 0.3 total THC. The problem with this approach, and the problem from a scientific perspective with this story, is that we know that total cannabinoid content present in a given plant is normally distributed within a population. This is a fancy way of saying that there are differences that exist amongst individuals within any given variety. And the amount of variation that's present within any given variety is determined in large part by the breeding that has taken place in an attempt to constrain the amount of variation. Now, what I'm going to tell you is that the folks that are claiming that they have this nailed down for this very stringent 0.3% total THC finished flower, like final trim flower, uh, are not giving you 100% accurate information here. So let's think about this from just basic perspective. Normal distribution means that we're looking at one specific population, in this case, a variety of plants, and that population is defined in terms of the variation that's present and consistency by two specific numbers. One is the mean, which is essentially an arithmetic average. So we're talking about all of the plants that are in this population having their total cannabinoid content measured and then divided by the total number of plants in the population to give us an overall idea of what the average total cannabinoid content would be. The other important term here is standard deviation, and this just means the amount of variation that's present in that particular population. Now, standard deviation, one way to think about this is that both above and below the mean, if you go one standard deviation above and below the mean, you're looking at, in a normal distribution, 68% of the total population is contained within that grouping. If you go an additional standard deviation out from that, so two standard deviations above the mean, two standard deviations below the mean, you're capturing over 95% of the individuals within that given population. So this is a really good way for us to be able to say with some certainty that a particular plant variety will meet the requirements if you've got 95% of the population that's attaining this goal. Okay, so let's step back for a second. We have these definitions. Now we can plug in some very specific variables. We know that the average ratio is about 25 to 1 with all of these different synthase variants that exist in the populations. And let's assume just for a second that we have a 10% total cannabinoid content mean, okay, with a standard deviation of 1%. So in this situation, that 25-to-1 ratio, the average, the mean THC in a finished flower at a 10% total cannabinoid content is 0.4%. Okay, this is already over the federal guidelines present in the 2018 Farm Bill and the rules that are being implemented by the USDA. Now, the THC range within this population goes all the way from 0.24%, which is legitimately would pass, depending on interlab and inter-instrument variability, up to 0.56%, which obviously would not pass. This is what a population at 10% total cannabinoid content with a type 3 plant, 25-to-1 ratio, this is what you're looking at. So for the folks who have been making these claims that they have varieties that consistently hit 8% CBD and below 0.3% THC, let's take a look at some of the assumptions that we would have to abide by to meet that 0.3% requirement in reality based on a normal distribution. So if you're trying to make sure that over 95% of your population meets that requirement at a 25-to-1 ratio, the mean total content must be below 5.5%. Okay, 5.5% total cannabinoid content to legitimately meet that 0.3% total THC at final product, right? We're talking about a trimmed flower at the end of the season going to a consumer. 5.5%, for as much as we talk about the importance of terpenes and other olfactory components playing a critical role in the experience for most consumers and having potential medical benefits, and that larger conversation that's taking place in the scientific literature on those topics, at the end of the day, 5.5% total cannabinoid content is not enough to be economically competitive in the modern industrial hemp production sector. I think the most aggressive that it is feasible to argue is for a 0.5% standard deviation in total cannabinoid content. At the levels that we're talking about with 5 to 10% total cannabinoid content within an individual plant, that 0.5% standard deviation represents literally the reporting error for most of the HPLC machines that would be doing quantification to an exacting degree. That 0.5% raises the potential cannabinoid content to 7.5% for the mean, which would be, again, it's not actually something that we've seen in practice, even with highly accurate instrumentation. However, give it the benefit of the doubt. Our approach is different. So for 2021, we are releasing varieties that have varins included in their total cannabinoid fraction. And this has a dual role. One, you're providing farmers and consumers with a new cannabinoid that has not been on the market and that is very exciting, from what we can tell in the scientific literature, has demonstrated there are no deleterious side effects that go along with this. In fact, it's a very nice combination between CBD and CBDV in plants. What this has done, we have equal parts CBD and CBDV in these new varieties. It has allowed us to attain, rather than a 25-to-1 CBD or a 25-to-1 total cannabinoid content to total THC ratio, we're now able to hit 60-to-1, which means that the 95% population threshold extends all the way out to 18% total cannabinoid content and a maximum mean of 16% total cannabinoid content. What this means is that you don't have to settle for a less than 5% mean in your total cannabinoid content. you can actually attain greater than threefold with proper breeding, a much, much more robust chemical profile, terpene profile, and other olfactory components over and above what is available in what we can only imagine at a 5% rate is a plant that has been significantly stymied and has many metabolic pathways shut down and not operating efficiently. What we've seen is that in many cases this leads to disease pressure, pests pressure over and above what you would have in a much higher cannabinoid content population. So it's not been an easy road. It's taken us over 4 years to get to this point where we're able to offer these varieties. Uh, Obviously, many millions of dollars in testing, trying to establish a large candidate pool that had exactly the right cannabinoid uh, presence and absence, and then also frequencies uh, over and above what we have seen in any other population that's present in a commercial variety to this point. Seed of these new Varin-rich varieties, beating all federal requirements for total THC, even on trim flowers, will be shipping spring of 2021 to all licensed hemp farmers in the United States.